It was not the era of the airplane, which was still a fragile contraption of canvas and wire. The answer is far darker than anyone admitted. In the years following the Great War, a new era of aviation dawned. It was not the era of the airplane, which was still a fragile contraption of canvas and wire. It was the era of the airship, the great silver leviathans that glided across the skies with a majesty that seemed to belong to another age. The dirigible was not merely a machine. It was a statement of human achievement, a symbol of a world that was growing smaller and more connected with each passing decade. The first great airships were built in Germany, where Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin had pioneered the rigid airship design. His creations were immense, far larger than any ocean liner, and they captured the imagination of a generation. These were the years when aviation was still an adventure, a test of courage and engineering. The transatlantic routes were the holy grail. To fly from Europe to America in a floating palace was a feat of astonishing ambition. The airship could carry passengers, mail, and freight across the ocean in a fraction of the time it took a steamship. The Graf Zeppelin, the predecessor to the Hindenburg, had circumnavigated the globe and made regular transatlantic crossings. It was the most successful commercial airship ever built. The public was entranced. Newspapers carried breathless accounts of the landings, the passengers waving from the observation decks, the enormous engines humming at full power. It seemed that the future of long-distance travel was written in the sky. The airship could go where the airplane could not. It could lift enormous payloads. It could provide a level of comfort and elegance that was unmatched by any other form of transport. The age of giants was upon the world, and the Germans were its undisputed masters. They had built the most advanced airships in history. They had conquered the Atlantic. But the age of giants was also an age of ambition, and ambition carries within it the seeds of destruction. The Hindenburg was the culmination of this dream, the largest and most magnificent airship ever constructed. It was the queen of the skies, and it was about to embark on a voyage that would end in flames. The Hindenburg, designated LZ-129, was a masterpiece of engineering and design. It measured 245 meters in length, longer than 3 football fields laid end to end. Its diameter was 41 meters, and its height, at a little over 44 meters, was comparable to that of a 15-story building. The airship was filled with 7 million cubic feet of hydrogen, a flammable gas that was chosen over the safer helium because the United States, which held a monopoly on helium production, refused to export it to Nazi Germany. The hydrogen was contained in 16 cotton gas cells, each of which was varnished to reduce leakage. The passengers and crew lived in a gondola attached to the bottom of the hull, a space that was divided into 2 decks. The upper deck contained the passenger cabins, the dining room, the lounge, and the observation promenades. The lower deck housed the galley, the passenger washrooms, and the crew quarters. The interior was a marvel of modern design. The walls were covered in lightweight wood paneling and decorated with murals depicting scenes from the Americas and Europe. The dining room was a place of elegance, with silver candlesticks, fine china, and a menu that rivaled the best restaurants in Berlin. There was a smoking room, a remarkable feature for an airship filled with explosive gas. The room was pressurized with air and had a single electric lighter. No matches were allowed. Passengers could look out through large angled windows at the world passing beneath them. The ship was powered by 4 Daimler-Benz diesel engines, each producing over 1,000 horsepower. They were mounted on the exterior of the hull, far away from the passenger spaces. The engines drove propellers that could push the airship to a top speed of more than 80 miles per hour. The Hindenburg was the peak of an entire era of engineering. It represented the highest hopes of its creators, a vision of a world connected by the sky. But hidden within its design was a fatal vulnerability. The choice of hydrogen was a compromise, a decision made under the pressure of international politics. It was a decision that would prove catastrophic. The Hindenburg was more than a passenger airship. It was a floating symbol of Nazi Germany, a propaganda tool of immense power. The Third Reich, led by Adolf Hitler and Hermann Göring, understood the value of spectacle. The airship was an engine of prestige, a demonstration of German technological superiority. It was a visible expression of the Nazi ideal of strength and modernity. The swastikas painted on the tail fins were not mere decoration. They were a proclamation of allegiance. The Hindenburg was used for propaganda flights over Germany, where it would drop leaflets and fly in formation with other airships. It was a living emblem of the Nazi regime. Göring, the Reichsmarschall and commander of the Luftwaffe, was personally invested in the success of the airship program. He saw the Hindenburg as a tool of soft power, a way to project German might to the rest of the world without firing a shot. The Americans who watched the Hindenburg pass overhead were not just seeing an airship. They were seeing a symbol of the new Germany, a country that was rising from the ashes of defeat to challenge the established order. The irony was that the Hindenburg was built by a company that was not entirely aligned with the Nazi Party. The Luftschiffbau Zeppelin was a private enterprise, and its founder, Dr. Hugo Eckener, was a vocal critic of the regime. He had openly opposed Hitler and had been forced to cede control of the company to Nazi loyalists. The Hindenburg was built under the shadow of political pressure. The Nazi government subsidized its construction, and they demanded that the airship be used for political purposes. It was a marriage of convenience between the aviation industry and the dictatorship. The result was a machine that was both a triumph of engineering and a tool of tyranny. The Hindenburg flew with the weight of the Third Reich on its shoulders. It was a symbol of a regime that would stop at nothing to achieve its goals. It was a symbol that would go down in flames, taking with it the dreams of an entire era. The Hindenburg offered a transatlantic service that was unlike any other. Passengers could board the airship in Frankfurt, Germany, and arrive in Lakehurst, New Jersey, in just 3 days. It was a fraction of the time required for an ocean liner, which typically took 5 to 7 days. The speed was not the only attraction. The Hindenburg was a floating hotel, a palace in the sky. The passengers were predominantly wealthy, influential people, bankers, industrialists, politicians, and celebrities. They paid a premium for the privilege of flying across the ocean in supreme comfort. The ticket price for a one-way passage was $400, a significant sum in the 1930s. To put that in perspective, a new car cost around $800. The Hindenburg was a luxury product for a select clientele. The journey was as much a social event as a transportation service. Passengers dined on fine china, drank champagne, and enjoyed the company of their fellow travelers. They would gather in the lounge, which had a grand piano, and listen to live music. They would smoke in the pressurized smoking room, a strange ritual that added to the sense of otherworldly luxury. They would watch the world pass beneath them through the observation windows. The airship would often fly over the Azores and the coast of Newfoundland before making its final approach to the American mainland. The experience was unforgettable, a dreamlike passage through the clouds. The passengers felt a sense of safety, a sense of being suspended above the struggles of the earth. They did not know that the airship was filled with a gas that could ignite with the smallest spark. The Transatlantic Service was the culmination of decades of German aviation ambition. It was the height of the Airship Era, a moment of optimism and confidence. The world had seen the future, and it was a future of graceful, silent flight. But the future was about to burn. On the afternoon of May 3, 1937, the Hindenburg departed from Frankfurt, Germany, on its final voyage. There were 97 people aboard, 36 passengers and 61 crew members. This was a relatively small number, as the Hindenburg was capable of carrying up to 72 passengers. The flight was not full, perhaps a sign of the times, a reflection of the anxieties that were growing in Europe. The passengers came from all walks of life. There were businessmen returning from negotiations, journalists on assignment, and wealthy tourists seeking adventure. Among them was a German acrobat named Ernst Lehmann, who had been on board the airship on nearly every one of its transatlantic crossings. There was also a young American woman named Margaret Mather, who was fleeing the shadows of an unhappy life in Germany. There was a team of children, including a young boy named Werner Franz, who was serving as a cabin boy. The atmosphere aboard the ship was one of anticipation. The passengers knew they were part of something extraordinary. They were traveling on the largest airship ever built. They were crossing the Atlantic in style and comfort. The departure was delayed by a few hours due to adverse weather conditions over the Atlantic. The crew was eager to leave, but they were forced to wait for the skies to clear. The passengers filled the time by exploring the ship, taking photographs, and writing letters to their loved ones. They did not know that many of these letters would never be delivered. They did not know that this was a journey that would end in disaster. The captain of the airship was Max Pruss, an experienced commander who had flown on the Hindenburg for 2 years. He was a quiet, meticulous man who was respected by his crew. He had full confidence in his ship. He did not know that the Hindenburg was about to be transformed from a symbol of German pride into a monument to tragedy. The engines hummed, and the ship rose slowly into the sky. The last glimpse of Frankfurt disappeared beneath the clouds. They were on their way. For 3 days, the Hindenburg glided across the Atlantic Ocean. The crossing was a dreamlike experience. The passengers were largely insulated from the world below. They ate, they slept, they read, and they watched the endless expanse of water pass beneath them. The ship was remarkably steady. The motion was almost imperceptible, a gentle sway that lulled the passengers into a state of calm. The crew went about their duties with quiet precision. The galley prepared meals that would be the envy of a luxury hotel. There was a menu that included classic German dishes, roast chicken, and exotic fruits. The passengers dined on fine china, and the conversation was often animated. They were a cosmopolitan group, and they enjoyed the company of strangers who had become companions on this extraordinary voyage. The journey was not entirely peaceful, however. The ship encountered rough weather and strong headwinds, which slowed its progress. The passengers could feel the strain on the engines as they fought against the wind. There was also a growing sense of unease. The political situation in Europe was deteriorating. The Spanish Civil War was raging, and Germany was becoming more aggressive. The passengers knew that they were flying on a ship that was owned and operated by a company that was under the control of the Nazi regime. Some of them were uncomfortable with the symbolism. They were flying on a swastika emblazoned vessel, a floating advertisement for a regime that many of them despised. The unease was not confined to the passengers. The crew was also feeling the pressure of the political environment. They were loyal to the company, but they were not all loyal to the Nazi Party. There were tensions within the crew. The atmosphere was one of strained civility. The 3 days over the Atlantic were a suspended moment in history. The passengers were caught between the old world and the new. They were flying into a future that was increasingly uncertain. They did not know that the journey would end in tragedy. On the evening of May 6, the Hindenburg approached the American coast. The passengers were excited. After 3 days at sea, they were ready to set foot on solid ground. The landing at Lakehurst Naval Air Station was supposed to be a routine event. The airship had landed there dozens of times before. But the weather over New Jersey was not cooperating. A line of thunderstorms was moving across the state, and the air was turbulent. The captain, Max Pruss, decided that it was too dangerous to land. He ordered the airship to circle over the area and wait for the weather to clear. The Hindenburg flew over Manhattan, a sight that caused a sensation. People on the streets looked up and saw the giant airship gliding silently over the skyline. It was a breathtaking image, a relic of an age that was passing. The ship then made a detour over the New England coast, spending hours in the air, waiting for the storm to pass. The delay was frustrating for the passengers, who were eager to disembark. They were already 2 hours late, and the wait was becoming tedious. The crew was also anxious. They knew that the ship was burning fuel, and they were concerned about the hydrogen cells. The airship was designed to fly in a specific range of conditions. The turbulence was causing the ship to flex, and the crew was worried that the fabric of the gas cells could be damaged. At 7 p.m., the weather finally cleared enough to attempt a landing. Pruss gave the order to approach the mooring mast. The Hindenburg made a low pass over the field, dropping its mooring lines. The ground crew was ready to secure the ship. The passengers gathered at the observation windows to watch the landing. They were relieved to be on the ground, or almost on the ground. They did not know that the drama was just beginning. The storm had passed, but the danger had not. The airship was landing in a state of high alert. The crew was on edge. The passengers were tired. The world was holding its breath.
Stop for a moment. Based on what you've just heard, what do you think really happened here? Drop your theory in the comments below. We read every single one.
At 7:25 p.m. on May 6, 1937, a small burst of flame appeared near the tail of the Hindenburg. It was a brief flicker, almost invisible against the bright evening sky. The flame was followed by a loud bang, a sound that echoed across the airfield. Then, in what seemed like an instant, the entire airship was engulfed in fire. The flame spread through the hydrogen cells like a wildfire through a dry forest. It took only 34 seconds for the Hindenburg to be consumed. The mighty airship, the queen of the skies, fell to the earth in a blazing funeral pyre. The fire was visible from miles away. It lit up the sky with an orange glow, a terrible beacon of destruction. The passengers and crew were trapped inside. Some jumped from the windows, desperate to escape the inferno. Others were burned alive inside the wreckage. The scene was one of unimaginable horror. The skeleton of the airship, a twisted framework of aluminum, crashed to the ground. The heat was so intense that it could be felt from a quarter mile away. The ground crew, who had been ready to secure the ship, now scrambled to rescue the survivors. They pulled people from the burning wreckage, ignoring the flames that were licking at their own bodies. Herbert Morrison, a radio reporter who was covering the arrival, witnessed the disaster. His voice, captured on a wax cylinder, became one of the most famous recordings in history. He cried out to the world, "Oh, the humanity." It was a phrase that came to symbolize the tragedy. The 34 seconds were a moment that changed the world. The era of the airship was over. The dreams of a silver fleet crossing the oceans had been incinerated in a matter of seconds. The Hindenburg was gone, and the world was left to ask one question: what had caused this catastrophe? The Hindenburg disaster claimed the lives of 36 people. 35 of them were on board the airship, their lives consumed by the inferno. The 36th was a ground crewman, Alan Hageman, who had been standing near the mooring mast, caught in the searing outward blast. The dead included some of the most prominent citizens of the age, their influence offering no shield. There was the seasoned aerobat Ernst Lehmann, a man who had been on the Hindenburg dozens of times. There was the great-grandson of a Supreme Court justice. The human cost reached across generations, mothers, fathers, and their innocent children. The youngest victim was a 3-year-old boy named Werner Dunner, his brief life ending amidst the terror. The toll was terrible, but it could have been much worse. Of the 97 people on board, 62 survived. It was a miracle that so many lived, a testament to sheer luck and human effort. The survivors, many dazed and in pain, were pulled from the burning wreckage by the heroic ground crew and by members of the Marine Corps, who rushed into the chaos. They were taken to the base hospital, where doctors and nurses worked tirelessly through the night, battling severe burns and smoke inhalation to save their lives. The survivors had their own stories to tell, tales of narrow escapes and miraculous luck. The cabin boy, Werner Franz, was in the galley when the explosion occurred. A water tank burst above him, drenching him in water, a sudden cold shower amidst the heat. He emerged from the wreckage, disoriented but virtually unscathed. There were others who jumped from the windows, landing on the soft grass of the airfield, fleeing the flames. There were those who were saved by the quick actions of the ground crew, pulling victims from the flames. The aftermath was a scene of organized chaos. Sirens wailed, and urgent commands were shouted. The families of the passengers waited at the airfield, hoping for word of their loved ones, their faces etched with anxious hope and dread. The newspapers carried banner headlines, and the nation was stunned into profound shock. The disaster was not just a tragedy. It was a public spectacle, witnessed by millions of people through grainy newsreels and breathless radio broadcasts that conveyed the terrifying sounds in real time. The dead were mourned with sorrow, and the survivors were celebrated for their endurance. But the question of what had caused the disaster remained unanswered. It was a question that would haunt the families of the victims and the world for decades. In the immediate aftermath of the disaster, the world demanded answers. The smoldering wreckage at Lakehurst fueled a global clamor for truth. Two governments, the United States and Germany, launched separate, urgent investigations into the cause of the explosion. The American inquiry, focused on public safety, was led by the Department of Commerce. The German investigation, a politically charged affair, was handled by the formidable Luftwaffe and the Zeppelin Company, reflecting state power and corporate interests. Despite their differing approaches, both inquiries reached a strikingly similar conclusion. The official verdict: the Hindenburg was destroyed by a hydrogen ignition caused by a static discharge. This theory suggested a minute leak of volatile hydrogen gas combined with the air and the ship's highly flammable outer skin. Then, as the airship grappled with a turbulent storm and performed its delicate landing maneuvers, a fateful spark of static electricity ignited the volatile mixture with devastating speed. The German delegation, led by the esteemed Dr. Hugo Eckener, vehemently rejected any possibility of sabotage. Their stance was undoubtedly shaped by immense pressure from the Nazi government, desperate to avoid any conclusion that might embarrass its meticulously crafted facade of technological superiority. The official finding, ultimately, was a political compromise. It meticulously blamed the disaster on the inherent dangers of hydrogen, without assigning specific culpability to any individual or oversight. The investigations were thorough, but not without their unsettling flaws. Inconsistencies peppered the harrowing testimonies of surviving crew members, often fragmented by shock and trauma. Gaps remained in the sparse physical evidence salvaged from the wreckage. Investigators, working under difficult, emotionally charged conditions, could not escape the pervasive influence of the volatile political climate. Consequently, while the official verdict was largely accepted by a public yearning for closure, it was not universally believed. A persistent undercurrent of doubt lingered. Whispers circulated from those who deeply suspected that the Hindenburg's demise had been no accident, but rather a deliberate act of sabotage. They pointed to the simmering political tensions of the era, the alarming rise of fascism, and the growing desperation of those who fiercely opposed the Nazi regime. The official verdict would stand for decades, but the profound questions surrounding the Hindenburg's fiery end would never fully go away. The disaster remained an enduring mystery, a haunting puzzle that defied easy explanation. The theory that the Hindenburg was destroyed by sabotage has persisted for generations. It is a seductive idea, a story of intrigue and espionage. The prime suspect in the sabotage theory is a crew member named Erich Spell. Spell was a rigger, a man whose job was to maintain the ship's structure. He was also a man with known anti-Nazi sympathies. His girlfriend was a member of the Communist Party, and he had expressed his opposition to Hitler's regime. The evidence against Spell is circumstantial, but it is compelling. He was known to have been in the area of the tail section shortly before the fire broke out. He was one of the few people on board who had access to the areas where the hydrogen cells were located. It is possible that he planted a time delay device in cell number 4, the cell that is believed to have been the first to ignite. After the disaster, an investigation by the Gestapo concluded that there was no evidence of sabotage. However, the Gestapo report was suppressed, and it was not made public for many years. When the report was eventually released, it was found to be incomplete. There were references to a secret investigation that had never been concluded. The sabotage theory is supported by several pieces of evidence. The fire was incredibly intense, far more intense than a simple hydrogen ignition would suggest. There was a report of a loud bang before the flames appeared. There was also the fact that the Hindenburg had recently undergone a refit, a process that could have allowed a saboteur to plant a device. The theory remains unproven, but it continues to be debated by historians and investigators. The case against Erich Spell is intriguing, but it is not conclusive. There is no definitive evidence that he was involved in the disaster. The sabotage theory is a mystery within a mystery, a subplot that adds to the enduring fascination with the Hindenburg disaster. It is a story of an act of defiance, of a man who may have sacrificed his life to strike a blow against the Nazi regime. Beyond the official verdict and the sabotage theory, there are other explanations for the Hindenburg disaster that have been proposed over the years. One of the most intriguing is the thermite ignition theory, advanced by the American physicist Addison Bain in 2012. Bain argued that the Hindenburg's outer skin was painted with a highly flammable compound. The paint contained iron oxide and aluminum, the components of thermite, a substance that burns at extremely high temperatures. According to Bain, the ship was essentially a flying bomb. The combination of the flammable paint and the hydrogen gas created a perfect recipe for disaster. Bain's theory was controversial, but it gained a degree of traction. He tested his hypothesis by applying the same paint to a model and igniting it. The model burned with a ferocity that was similar to the Hindenburg fire. Another theory suggests that the disaster was caused by a buildup of static electricity in the atmosphere. The Hindenburg had been flying through a thunderstorm, and the crew had been preparing for landing. The theory posits that the ship collected a massive charge of electricity, which then discharged into the ground, igniting the hydrogen. This theory is supported by the fact that the ground crew reported feeling shocks from the mooring lines. However, the static electricity theory is less well supported than the other explanations. The scientific evidence is mixed. Finally, there is the simple theory that the Hindenburg was struck by lightning. This is the most straightforward explanation, but it also the least likely. The airship was equipped with a lightning protection system, and there is no evidence that a lightning strike occurred. The alternative theories are a testament to the complexity of the disaster. The Hindenburg was a unique machine, and its destruction was a unique event. The explanations are diverse, but none of them are universally accepted. The mystery persists. The Hindenburg disaster marked the end of an era. In the weeks and months that followed the tragedy, public confidence in airships evaporated. The giant Zeppelins, which had once been seen as the future of travel, were now viewed with suspicion and fear. The Zeppelin company had planned to build a sister ship, the LZ-130, but the project was cancelled. The Hindenburg sister ship, the LZ-130 Graf Zeppelin II, was completed but was used only for military reconnaissance and was scrapped in 1940. The Transatlantic Passenger Service was abandoned. The routes that had connected Europe to the Americas were closed. The age of the airship, which had lasted less than 2 decades, was effectively over. The disaster had a profound impact on the aviation industry. The airplane, which had been viewed as a second-rate competitor to the airship, suddenly became the primary mode of air travel. The airplane was faster, more reliable, and, after the Hindenburg, safer. The development of the commercial aviation industry was accelerated by the disaster. The airlines that had been struggling to compete with the Zeppelins suddenly found themselves in a dominant position. The Hindenburg disaster was a turning point in history. It was a moment when one technology died and another was born. The transition was not immediate. There were still airships in use for military purposes, but the civilian airship industry was gone. The silver giants that had once filled the skies were a memory. The end of the airship era was a tragedy, but it was also a lesson in the fragility of human ambition. The Hindenburg was a symbol of what could be achieved, but it was also a reminder of what could be lost. The disaster was a cautionary tale for an age that was increasingly obsessed with technological progress. It was a warning that even the most beautiful creations can be destroyed in an instant. More than 8 decades after the Hindenburg disaster, the question of what caused the fire remains a matter of intense debate. Modern investigators have revisited the evidence, applying the tools of forensic science to the old case files. In 2019, National Geographic produced a documentary that attempted to solve the mystery. The program brought together a team of experts from different fields. They examined the photographs of the fire, the eyewitness testimony, and the physical evidence that had been preserved in archives. The team concluded that the most likely cause of the disaster was a leak of hydrogen gas. The leak was likely caused by a damaged gas cell. The cell had been damaged by the turbulence of the storm, or perhaps by a sharp turn that the ship had made during its approach. The gas escaped and mixed with the air. A spark, probably caused by static electricity, ignited the gas. The fire then spread to the outer skin of the airship. The National Geographic investigation did not find any evidence to support the sabotage theory. The team examined the possibility of a time-delay device and found no credible evidence to support it. They also rejected the thermite theory, arguing that the paint on the Hindenburg was not as flammable as Bain had suggested. The current consensus among experts is that the Hindenburg disaster was a tragic accident, caused by a combination of factors: the use of hydrogen, the ship's design, and the weather conditions. The mystery is not entirely solved, however. There are still unanswered questions about the precise sequence of events. The official investigation was hampered by the destruction of evidence, and the political pressures of the time. The evidence that remains is fragmentary and open to interpretation. The Hindenburg disaster will probably never be fully explained. It will remain a source of speculation and fascination, a mystery that refuses to be solved. The Hindenburg disaster is remembered not just for the lives that were lost, but for the way it was witnessed. It was the first major disaster to be captured on film and broadcast to the nation. Herbert Morrison's radio report, with its famous cry of "Oh, the humanity," became a defining moment in the history of journalism. The newsreel footage of the airship burning was shown in movie theaters across the country. It was the first time that millions of Americans had seen a disaster unfold in real time. The images of the burning airship and the screams of the victims imprinted themselves on the national consciousness. The Hindenburg became a symbol of the fragility of human ambition. It was a reminder that the things we build, no matter how magnificent, can be destroyed in an instant. The disaster also marked the end of an era. The airship, which had been a symbol of the future, was now a relic of the past. The dream of a silver fleet crossing the oceans was gone. The Hindenburg was replaced by the airplane, a machine that was faster, safer, and more reliable. The legacy of the Hindenburg is a complex one. It is a story of tragedy, of hubris, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. The survivors of the disaster rebuilt their lives. The families of the victims mourned their loss. The nation, and the world, moved on. But the memory of the Hindenburg has never faded. It is a cautionary tale, a reminder that progress is not always a straight line. It is a story that continues to captivate us, a mystery that we may never fully solve. The 34 seconds on that evening in 1937 changed the course of history. They transformed the way we travel, the way we communicate, and the way we think about the future. The Hindenburg is gone, but its story lives on. It lives on in the photographs, in the newsreels, and in the memories of those who were there.
Before you go, here's the thing. Every week we investigate another mystery the world could never solve. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And here's the most important part. The next case we investigate could be yours. Tell us in the comments which unsolved mystery, disappearance, or disaster we should cover next. We read every suggestion, and the stories that stay with you are the ones we bring to life.